So we're going to talk a little bit today. I mean, obviously, so how many of you have seen me here before? Quite a few of you. Okay, so there'll be, there's a couple things that we link in so that it connects to things that we've talked about before. But we're talking about, obviously, behavior. We've spent a great deal of time over the last few years talking about how to do behavioral assessments and how to develop behavior intervention plans. And one of the biggest challenges that oftentimes comes into play is issues of when kids are engaging or when students are engaging in behaviors to escape and avoid. And it's been estimated that approximately 60 to 70% of the FBAs and BIPs that people develop, escape and avoidance is identified at least as one of the functions. All right? Now, one of the challenges is that for most of the functions, as we'll see as we go through things, the function kind of tells you what you need to do. So if I'm doing something for peer affiliation, obviously you're going to give me a new behavior that's going to help me be able to make friends and to feel like I'm connected. The challenge comes if what I'm doing is to get the heck out of Dodge and not do this junk that you want me to do, it becomes a whole lot more challenging to think about what am I going to put in place here to make things work. So we're going to look very carefully at the function of escape and avoidance and what that means to us. So let me start off by maybe asking, again, you're taking a day, you're coming in here. What are some of the key issues you want to make sure we talk about today? Anybody want to share some things that they're really hoping that they can get an answer to, that when they go back to school, they can do something with it? Yes? So transitioning from one place in the building to another? Okay. All right, so transitions can oftentimes, even if it's just from one activity to another, for some of our students, it's a challenge, right? Work completion. Okay, so you're giving me a task and I'm not all that excited about your task, or something else takes my interest and I'm going to do that instead. All right? Yeah.
Like appropriate replacement behavior.
Okay.
I know one thing we don't want them to be doing, but what would be a good replacement for that?
Okay. Yeah, and I think that's the challenge with escape and avoidance, is that there's not a really quick replacement behavior. And we're going to look at that because with escape and avoidance, one of the challenges that we have is that doesn't tell us a lot. It doesn't tell us what's going on underneath that issue, and that's what we have to explore. So we'll look very carefully at those kind of things.
How do recite canceling behavior?
Okay.
And I guess that's more avoidance, but how do we, obviously they like the activity, and how do we replace it with something other than playing with it?
Okay. And we'll actually talk about that. We're going to share some, I'm going to share some information on a little study we did on kids who were becoming aggressive in terms of what could we do and some strategies that we use that were shown to be effective. I think one of the big challenges that we have with escape and avoidance, and we'll talk about this in more detail, is the fact that most of us are trained as behaviorists. So if all of a sudden I'm coming over here and I'm saying, oh, take out your math book, turn to page 119, we're going to do the first 10 problems, and you tell me to do something that's physiologically impossible for me to do to myself, right? You don't want to do this, okay? What goes through my mind as a behaviorist is that if I don't get this student to do this, I'm going to be reinforcing inappropriate behavior. And it makes me start becoming, you will do it and you will like it, right? And what happens is that if I've got a student who's having a challenge in certain kind of things, what that does is it escalates the behavior. And pretty soon, I've got a crisis. And one of the issues that we're seeing, I don't know how much this impacts some of you, but the whole issue of restraint and seclusion is becoming a really, really hot issue in schools. And what happens is oftentimes when we ask kids to do things and don't give them a way to get away from the process and they can't do it, they escalate into becoming into crisis behavior that ultimately results in our putting hands on these kids. And actually there was a study done by Pearson not too long ago that students with sensory disorders, especially those sensory impairments, especially those who are below 5th grade, have a higher rate of restraint and seclusion than other students in special education. Which amazes me because, and we'll talk just a little bit about that this afternoon in terms of some of the challenges that presents for us when all of a sudden we're trying to restrain somebody who has to use their hands to speak, right? In terms of we're taking away their ability to talk and to communicate their needs in the process of trying to keep things safe, and it ends up making things even more challenging for us.
Addressing procrastination, just getting started.
Okay. So I don't, and again, I don't want to do this, or in some cases, maybe I don't understand what it is you want me to do. And how do we move with that? Okay, all right. Other key issues in terms of escape and avoidance that you find yourselves dealing with? Yeah.
Sustained work effort for kids who have issues with attention and impulsivity.
Okay. I think one of the other big areas that we're seeing a lot more information on is the fact that how many of you have students who, amongst all their other issues, also have ADHD, right? Okay. It's kind of like the soup of the day. Kind of everybody's got ADHD. What we're finding is that an awful lot of students, especially if you have some of those students with quote-unquote ADHD that are not responding to medications, what we're finding is that it's really not ADHD. It's their response to a kind of adversity in terms of growing up and just the issues that occur in their lifetime results in their looking very ADHD-like, but it's not ADHD at all. It's an entirely different issue, and the challenge that creates in terms of that we start to try to train, and work with the students as though they have ADHD, and that's not the real problem. Okay. All right. Anything else? All right, so we'll start off in terms of the whole, I'm going to steal somebody's handout here if I can real quickly, just so I can keep myself kind of moving in terms of what's going on. Can I steal this for just a few minutes? All right. So part of the thing that we're thinking about is that if you think about schools have changed, and we've talked about this in the past. We are asking you as teachers to do far more than we've ever asked you to do before. Okay? You've got much greater expectations in terms of academics. In many schools, we're reducing the kinds of supports for social and emotional kinds of issues, all in favor of math and reading, right? We have pushed the curriculum. Now, how many of you, anybody here work with preschool, first kindergarten age? Are we seeing an increase in behavior problems there? In most schools across the country, we're seeing a huge influx of behavior issues at those early grades. And part of that is that we have pushed the curriculum down so far to where we're asking many kids to do things that are developmentally inappropriate for them to do. And we're asking it of a population that does not have the self-regulation skills. So when all of a sudden you ask me to do something I don't feel comfortable that I can do, I'm up and running out of the school. I'm running around, I'm hiding, I'm doing all those kinds of things, and all of a sudden these preschool teachers are going, we've never dealt with that before. And this is where we have a bit of a problem being in Illinois. This is one of those areas where the restraint and seclusion is kind of dovetailing in. If you were a preschool teacher, and this is circle time, and we're sitting at circle time and you're telling me about what day of the week it is and what month we're doing, and we're going to look outside and look at the weather, and I'm going, you know what? I really don't give a damn. There are pop beads over here in the drawer. And I want to go play with the pop beads. And so I get up off my chair and I walk over to the pop beads and I plop down and I'm having a great time. That somehow seems to be a problem for most teachers. And what oftentimes teachers would do is they would get up, they would walk over, they would pick me up, and they would bring me back to my chair. That's restraint. All right? The minute you pick me up and I start struggling because I don't want to be picked up, you have met the definition of restraint, and we are seeing schools get in trouble for that because I was not doing anything imminently dangerous. You have no right to put your hands on me. All right? And so all of a sudden people are going, what? Well, this wasn't restraint. Wait a minute. This is what's going on. So we're seeing lots of changes in the demands, greater expectations in terms of what we're able to do or capable of doing. It's now estimated that 1 in 5 children facing a typical classroom teacher has a diagnosable mental health problem. And most of those kids are not going to have a diagnosis of a mental health problem. It's estimated that over half the people who will ever have a mental health problem any time in their life will begin to show symptoms between the ages of 11 and 14. Again, they're not going to have a diagnosis. They're just going to come in and start showing you behaviors. So they're going to start showing you issues related to their anxiety or their depression or issues around mood disorders. And what we're going to typically see this as a teacher is willful, inappropriate behavior. And even though we talk about utilizing positive behavioral supports, quite frankly, schools tend to still use punishment as their main approach to dealing with behavior problems. Maybe not as overt as before, but we're still using kind of aversive situations. Right? And all of a sudden you're trying to punish me out of my mental health problem. How successful do you think that's going to be? Not terribly successful. In fact, what it happens to do is it tends to exacerbate the problems. We've talked about before, even for those students with ADHD. If you're that preschool, kindergarten, first grade teacher, I'm little Ricky with ADHD, what am I going to hear a lot of in the course of a typical school day? Stop it, don't, sit down. And the likelihood of my ratio of my reprimands to praise being so much more in favor of reprimand is almost a guarantee. And we know that there's a really strong correlation between if I have ADHD and if I am being punished, even mildly, for the symptoms of my ADHD, it's likely to increase the probability that I will also start to display oppositional defiant disorder, which is a much more problematic behavior. Because all of a sudden you're punishing me for things, I don't even understand why you're punishing me. So I finished my paper, thank God, I actually stayed hooked in long enough to finish the paper. And the teacher says, okay, now go take that and put it up on the desk. And as I'm walking over here, I see you, and I put the paper down. Did you see the game last night? I couldn't believe that North Carolina won. Wasn't that amazing? And we're talking, and all of a sudden the teacher goes, Ricky, what are you doing? I'm talking, right? We're communicating here. You need to go sit down. Okay. Where's your paper? What paper? Right? If you had a $100 bill and said, I'll give you this $100 if you can find that paper, he wouldn't have a clue where that paper's at, right? And all of a sudden I'm being punished. I don't even know what it is that you're upset about. And it seems to be a problem. Right? So those kind of things become issues for us. Right? Some of this is review for those of you that have been here before, but it sets the groundwork. I think one of the other issues that we have to keep in place is the fact that our students bring characteristics into the classroom. Right? So think of some of the students that you have, and by virtue that they've got a hearing impairment, or they're deaf, or they've got some vision kinds of issues, that even adds more challenges for some of these kids in terms of making sense out of this stuff we call education. Right? What are some of the challenges that these kids bring in? What are some of the characteristics you're likely to see from the students that you work with? What might you see that perhaps could become problematic in terms of a classroom? Yeah. Talking out. Okay. All right. So they're gonna talk out. They're gonna make disruptive sounds, vocalizations, whatever situation's going on. What else?
Trouble using behavior instead of words.
Okay.
To communicate.
All right.
And that behavior is easier than words.
And in many cases, they may not know what, they've got an issue, they've got a concern, but they don't have necessarily a means to communicate that issue. So they choose to, they choose to engage in behavior. Yes?
Lack of confidence, so they give up easily?
Okay, lack of confidence, that they're not going to necessarily have that level of persistence that perhaps that we want to have.
Lack of incidental learning, consequences at home because of lack of language.
Okay. All right, so in many cases they have, maybe they haven't learned to be sedentary. Is that an important issue in schools? We want kids to be able to sit and for relatively long periods of time. They may have been able to just, because, again, lack of communication, maybe issues around not feeling comfortable setting limits. All of a sudden we've got kids who aren't necessarily prepared to meet those social expectations of the classroom.
We have kids often have home issues that are beyond their control.
Okay, yeah, a lot of those, right? Okay, I've often thought there ought to be one more category of special education called crazy parent, right? Because God knows we've got certain kids, it's kind of like if we could fix that, the problem would go away, right? That's the problem, okay? So you've got this issue in terms of, whatever's going on at home. I was in a school in Hammond yesterday, and meeting with a teacher before the school day started, and one of the students that was coming in, actually the student they wanted me to look at, who was having some real significant behavior problems, she said he's going to come in loaded for bear because home is terrible. And he has been home now for break. He didn't look forward to wanting to go home for break, and she just knew that he was going to come back and there was going to be a whole lot of baggage that was going to have to be dealt with in terms of what had happened or not happened over break, okay? And we have those kids, right? We had that situation. And we can't fix families in many cases, right? Right? So again, we're feeling anxiety. We're seeing the number one question.
You had a comment over here.
Oh, okay, yes.
Oh, I was going to say, one of the factors that we deal with a lot is kids with, like you said, the unidentified mental health, pretty severe mental health concerns like bipolar. I'm suspecting a couple of kids that we're not trained to help with in the school environment. So, good job.
And they've actually just added, because there's been such a change in the last 10, 15 years on mental health. I mean, it used to be a time when if you weren't 17 years old, you couldn't be depressed, right? I'm sorry, you can't be depressed, you're not 17, right? And what we found is that all of a sudden things are getting younger and younger and younger, and we're pushing things down. We've actually added a few new disorders. The DSM-5, one of those actually is kind of a precursor to bipolar. Because we had students who were showing symptoms, but they didn't necessarily feel comfortable of saying this was a bipolar disorder. So we're seeing some even disorders that we haven't seen before as far as just titles in terms of things that are going on. How many of you in your pre-service training had any discussion whatsoever of mental health issues? Look around the room. 1 or 2 hands, right? Okay. All from one person, right? Yeah. So what we find is that usually was something we don't talk about in pre-service education. I still have schools that kind of go, oh, we don't talk about mental health. We've got enough problems with what we have right now on our plate. We certainly don't want to talk about mental health. It's like, well, unfortunately, the student is not going to leave their anxiety disorder at the gate. They're bringing it into the classroom, okay? And the biggest rise we're seeing in mental health issues is anxiety. Right? Not only in the students, we're seeing it in the staff. Right? And not just I'm a little anxious, we're seeing actually full-blown anxiety disorders and kind of situations that are coming out. Because what we've created in the school with all of the testing, the pressures that we're putting on is that if you've got any biological predisposition, we have created the ideal situation to make these things come out. Right? But we have not prepared the workforce in terms of how to deal with that. So we're seeing a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression. All right? Again, this situation of characteristics. If I have these student characteristics, so again, let's just pretend that I've got this student with sensory impairments, but also has some other issues. Maybe I've got some ADHD. Right? What are you going to see in the classroom? What kind of things am I going to start doing? What were some of the issues you brought up? I may not want to stay engaged in the task, right? Okay.
I might see pure, tension, I might act out,
Okay.
get up and walk away from that.
All right, so you're going to see me getting up and walking around. A lot of movement, right? We've all seen those kids who are Einstein from here up and Fred Astaire from here down, right? Okay. You're going to see issues around the fact that we say that they can't attend. And again, one of the things that we talk about with kids with ADHD, I've mentioned this before in the groups here, is that actually they attend fantastically. They attend to everything, right? I like the glare off your glasses, right? She's got a pink cup. I wonder what's in that pink cup, okay? All that, what they can't do is put all that aside and say, watch the class here, watch the teacher, watch what's going on. Everything pulls them off, all right? Organizational skills, is that a big issue for some of our students? Absolutely. In terms of where's my papers, what book am I doing, a pencil? Supposed to bring a pencil? Do you have a pencil? Because I don't have a pencil, all right? Can we put a sign up that says kids with ADHD need not apply? Kids with anxiety disorders need not come in, right? We serve everybody that comes in. Us and the police force, we're the only two groups that can't say no to anyone. They come, we have to serve them, all right, kind of a situation. We have teacher behavior. What do you see as some of the teacher behaviors in the teachers that you work with, or maybe even in yourself, that may get in the way of being successful with some of these kids? Yeah. Okay, power struggles, all right. What kind of things may cause a power struggle?
Teachers see the kids trying to get away with their behavior, and teachers
All right, we're going to talk a lot about that today because that's a really common issue for kids who engage in escape and avoidance. It's like, you will do it and you will like it, ja? Wie het is? All right? Gets in that kind of a situation. So part of the issue is that, is teachers getting into a power struggle. What else might you see? Do you see teachers ever, one of the things I find with some of the students that I work with that have hearing issues is the teachers kind of discount them as part of the classroom. It becomes the issue if there's an interpreter, if there's somebody else taking them, that's their student. I don't have to work with it. The student stops being a piece of the fabric of the classroom. Okay, and the students feel this. They sense that I'm really not part of this. This is all going on over here, and I'm kind of over here, and I'm really not part of the life of this class, right? In terms of what's going on. What else might we see? Anything else from a teacher's behavior kind of a situation?
Unrealistic expectations.
Okay.
And that's partly due to what's expected. I have a kid integrated into kindergarten. As far as I'm concerned, kindergarten is practically second grade now.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it used to be, can you get along with other kids? Can you share materials, right? Kind of a thing. Now it's, you better be reading. By the time you get out of kindergarten, you better be reading. Yeah, kind of a situation. Somebody else had their hand up, yeah.
It is like the day-to-day frustrations, and a lot of our teachers have had, either they get the same kid all day long, or they've had the same kid for a couple of years, or that same kind of kid, and so that frustration just builds up, especially when dealing with families and parents, asking for things to come back that don't come back, or asking for families to be involved and prepared and help with the school is just difficult.
So that the frustration of working with families sometimes in terms of, and the issues that the student may bring on a day-to-day basis. And I think one of the challenges that may happen, especially if I've got a child who's deaf or significantly hearing impaired in a family that's hearing, is they don't necessarily have those skills to be able to, that's a whole new language they're going to have to learn. They're going to be behind the curve. They may not be all that capable or motivated in some cases, perhaps, to deal with stuff, and all of a sudden that becomes an issue.
Just to piggyback off what Kelly said, I work with a teacher who was just saying the other day, she doesn't get a break during the day at all. So having multiple grade levels, when half of the kids go to gym, you still have the other half. So it's not like a gen ed teacher that their whole class goes and they can go to the bathroom or take a breath or.
It's that, so that frustration, and there's that frustration of that I'm on all day long. I don't have my prep period necessarily. I've got all these different, and I've got multiple age groups, even if it's not a large spread in grades, I may have a huge differentiation in terms of ability levels that I've got to prepare for. And so there's just a whole different level of work, expectations. I know I started off as a math and science teacher, but ended up being the BD teacher, right? Kind of because when I first came to school, I thought, oh, I'm going to be teaching calculus and physics. This is going to be great. Well, as a first-year math teacher, what do you end up teaching? Remedial math, right? And I just happened to be good with the kids who were at risk, and so pretty soon they said, would you be the BD teacher? Well, as the BD teacher, yeah, you go to the bathroom with the kids too, right? I mean, it's the whole, you don't get those breaks. That's just part of the game, right?
And then the students, even if you don't have the same students year after year, they're together year after year after year after year, and it's such a small population that they're kind of like siblings, which is a whole different ballgame than classroom peers.
Okay, yeah, so that you get that kind of group solidarity, and it becomes difficult sometimes, I think, because they have been with each other year after year after year, for them to even try to break away and try new skills. They've got this role that they're kind of cast into that is. It's very much like a family.
My students integrated into a gen ed kindergarten class. A kindergarten class without my student has 25 kids. So, like I always say, it's not a bad class, but 25 kids talking is really loud. If you had 18, it wouldn't be as loud. That's not their fault.
Right.
And I try to not be frustrated, and I know the teacher tries not to be frustrated, but it's really hard when the noise level gets up here. But then, and that's It's not, that's just what it is what it is. But that's certainly not their fault, but you get very frustrated with that.
And the fact that you have those large class sizes and the noise, whether, yeah, you're right, but it is going to have an impact.
Yeah.
It's going to have a very significant impact on, I'm already having a hard time understanding and separating sounds and things. Now I've got this other issue, if I got a hearing impairment, that is on top of that, right?
Right. I mean, it's, I'm frustrated.
I see sometimes a lack of empathy from the classroom teacher. If I have a student who's totally blind, then they're all in, what do we gotta do? But if I have a student who's somewhere between perfect vision and blind, they're like, well, just do it. It's right there.
Right.
It's right in front of you. And that's frustrating.
And I think that, again, I think perhaps some of the lower incidence disability, I mean, I think in disabilities in general education teachers have one course in special education, right? And we know by research that one course is worse than none because it points out the differences, not the similarities. And all of a sudden, I don't think I've got the skills to do this kind of a thing. This student is bringing in issues way beyond my capability. Had I wanted to be a special ed teacher, I'd have been a special ed teacher, you know. And all of a sudden, I get these students coming in. So I think that they don't truly understand what the impact of some of these disorders and disabilities and impairments create, especially in a world of increased demands, you know, and the pace that we are asking students to learn at today is pretty challenging.
I would say the same thing with our deaf ed teachers. I mean, we were trained in deaf education. We weren't trained in autism and behaviors and, you know, all of these additional disabilities that our students are walking into the classroom with.
Right.
So, you know, when we all have this dream of teaching this little deaf class, now it's this little deaf class and all of this stuff added to it. And we have teachers that don't feel like they know what they're doing or how to handle those demands.
And that's kind of, I think, endemic of the entire special ed spectrum in terms of that when we, you know, I mean, to a certain extent, in the lower incidence, you guys actually have more depth to your training to work, at least with the population that you've been trained for. The rest of the, you know, the learning specialist ones, for the behavior piece, they have one course class more than the general education teacher, which has nothing, right? And I've got this thin veneer of knowledge, and now I'm supposed to be able to serve everybody. And our general education teachers, I've been at the University of Illinois since 1987. Every year I go down to the dean and I say, we have got to have a course in behavior for our general education teachers. It is the #1 reason teachers leave the field. And I still have colleagues in the curriculum and instruction department that say, if they have a good curriculum, they don't have to worry about behavior. And I'm like, when the hell were you last in a classroom? You know, that's not gonna get you through. We've got so many issues coming in, and these teachers, most teachers, you also, we do not give you a toolbox to deal with behavior. We just give you the kids with behavior problems, right? And it's up to you to figure out what's going on.
Okay, so I'm going to have a comment that's probably positive, because I think
That's good.
we just dwell on the negative. And what I noticed is that I have a student who has a cochlear implant and is integrated 50% on average a day into a gen ed kindergarten. And what I notice is that when she clears the table, those gen ed kids just pick her stuff up, give it to me. They have a better understanding of her than I do, and then the gen ed teacher does. And they just kind of just go along. And so I sometimes wish I could be more like them and more accepting. Of course, it helps that they're kindergarten.
Right.
They don't have any expectations. They come from a preschool, but not years of school where everyone sits in a desk. So I think that helps. It gives me hope, but I still am frustrated more than they are.
You just said something.
But I have more expectations. I think.
I love the acceptance that many students have towards other students. You know, I think that tends to wane by the time they start getting to middle school and high school, because we've socialized them now to where you've got to look like everybody else and be like everyone else. But I mean, I've got a student with autism that literally he's got autism. He also has Tourette's syndrome, and one of his tics is like a bark. And when he gets upset, and nervous, he gets more tick behavior. So he tends to bark. And I know every year I am going to get a call from the teacher within about the third week of school saying, this kid is barking and he's disrupting my entire class. And I go, you know what? Look around. He is not disrupting your entire class. These kids have been with, that's one of the better things of this kind of situation. They just know Randy barks, right? It's no big deal, right? Who it's disrupting is the teacher, all right? Now, that's still an issue, but it's a different issue than disrupting the class. And it has to have a different answer than if he was disrupting the class. You know, so it becomes this, how do we change that frame in terms of what's the real problem? You know, because kids they can be incredibly accepting. You know, we just have to find ways to capitalize on that and keep that going. Unfortunately, it tends to get lost as they age out. All right, so we've got teacher behavior, and then we've got those curricular demands. If those things do not match, all right, so if all of a sudden I've got a student who the longest I can attend is 8 minutes, and you're giving me a task that's requiring me to attend for 20 minutes, we're going to have a problem, aren't we? Okay? If you're giving me work that says I have to be able to acquire the knowledge through reading, and the material is written at the 7th grade level, and I read at the 4th grade level, we're going to have a problem. And unfortunately, one of the challenges that we have is in our system right now, and I think, you know, again, part of the issue of trying to understand what's going on is that we can't fix a problem until we understand what the problem is. But I think part of the issue is that teachers themselves are feeling so much pressure that I have to teach this content at this level, at this speed. I mean, there is a district not too far from here that actually surprises me because I know the superintendent. He was a good friend of mine. If this is April, what, 4th, 5th, 4th, you better be on page 639. All right? I mean, it is like, and I mean, they literally go through, and if they're not, the teacher gets an indication that you're not where you need to be. They're no longer teaching students, they're teaching the curriculum, right? Because I don't care that you're not ready for page 629, that's where we're going to be today, because that's what we've got to be teaching, all right? That's not, I don't think there's anybody there that necessarily thinks this is good pedagogy. Right? But it's like that's the challenge that we have here, and that's the environment we're trying to deal with these kids. And when you have that kind of situation, you're going to start getting behaviors. And a lot of these behaviors are going to be those behaviors to escape and to avoid. All right? In terms of I'm going to start running out of the classroom. I'm going to put my head down. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to start making, you know, telling you that, you know, this sucks. I'm not doing this crap. Right? And I love that, I mean, do students know what buttons they have to push with what teacher? Right? So if you don't like swearing, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to swear. I'm going to accentuate all kinds of, and I love the situation if I say, this is a bunch of shit, I'm not doing this crap. And what do we hear teachers oftentimes tell the student or say to the student? You can't swear in my classroom. Clearly they can, they just did. Right? Did you miss my swearing? Let me try this again. Okay? And the minute you tell me I can't do something as a student, especially if I'm already kind of a little bit escalated, you tell me I can't do something, what am I going to do? I'm going to do more of it. All right? Let me show you some other stuff I can do. All right? We might start seeing passive-aggressive. We might start seeing defiance, disruptive behavior, a lot of these kind of situations that are going on. All right? The number one thing we still do is punish. Now, I know we've talked about this a little bit before, but if I go in, you'd mentioned talkouts. Now, again, part of the issue that you've got in terms of this population is that in some cases there's not much speech, right? You're talking about sign language, different things going to go on, but there's still vocalizations, different kind of things that are happening. In most classrooms, and when it adds to the noise, talkout is the number one problem behavior in most classrooms. And most teachers have no clue how to address talkouts. All right? In fact, the most common response of a teacher for a student who talks out is to use a verbal reprimand. Okay? So they're going to talk out. And in order for me to give a verbal reprimand, do I have to stop teaching the curriculum? Who's the most disruptive person in most classrooms? The teacher. They disrupt the instruction far more than any student does. Okay? And again, for some of our students, that becomes one more added problem. Now there's a lack of continuity, even in the delivery of the material. All right? So how do I begin to make sense out of what's going on in terms of what's happening? One of the things that we've started doing a lot of is, and again, I know that for those of you that have been in other sessions of mine, I'm going to harp on this again because it is just so critical. The number one statistic in any classroom, if you want to look at success, is the ratio of praise to reprimand. If I am in a classroom and I am getting more reprimand than I am getting praise, I am not going to do well in that classroom. And this is not just correlational research. We, Joe Webby and Phil Gunter and Ken Danny, a number of people who study this. If I can go in, if I've got a teacher who's reprimanding either the class or a given student more, and I can get them to shift that, the student will do better. All right? It is a cause and effect, not a correlational relationship. Okay? We've actually gone in and started getting to where, in the course of any week, you're going to have at least somebody come in and collect data across all the kids. All right? And we have made tremendous changes in schools by simply adopting this. And we train paraprofessionals, we train everybody everybody in the school knows how to collect this data. And so sometime I might come in for 20 minutes on a Thursday, and I'm simply going to just watch you teach, and I'm just going to keep track of what's going on here in terms of how we're delivering praise and reprimand across different situations. So in this case, opportunities to respond, was it correct? Was it academic praise general, academic praise specific? I like the fact that you actually show your work in terms of carrying that math problem. That was great. Behavioral praise. The other issue is that as teachers, if we go into classrooms, if there is praise being given, it is almost always entirely for academics. Teachers rarely give praise for behavior. Yet, for many of the students that we're concerned about, at least in this session, behavior is one of those critical issues. And if I never get any feedback on how I'm doing behaviorally, especially when I'm doing it well, why would I want to do this? All right. Yep.
It's just a little story. I was in Iowa and I had to take a bunch of classes. One of them was applied behavior analysis, and that's called the 90-10 rule, that we spend 90% of our time on bad behavior and 10 on good, and it should be the opposite. So I'm in this class with 22-year-olds. I'm obviously in my 50s. And I said that under my breath that it was easier said than done. And then the teacher called me a jaded older teacher. I know that. I learned it. That was on the midterm. I got that question right. But putting it into practice is really, 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 really difficult. It sounds so great, and I get it, but and I'm trying not to be a jaded older teacher, but I have problems.
So she said that back in the day we were talking about a 90-10, 90% positive, 10%. We want 90% positive. Usually it's 90% negative to 10% positive. And how do you get teachers to do that? And when she brought that up, she talked about being a jaded older teacher, right?
That's
okay.
Well, no, I said under my breath. And
You-
he said it out loud.
Very overtly, okay. And people will talk about different formulas. It should be 4 positives to 1 negative. It should be 6 positives to 1. I'll be real honest with you. The research that I've looked at and things that, if I can get the teacher to just have it be more positive than negative, give me 1.1 to 1. I'll be happy. All right? The dilemma that I find when I go into classrooms is the fact that as teachers, we think we are incredibly positive. And so I'll ask the teacher, because I collect this data all the time, and I'll say, well, how do you think you did? Oh, I'm great. I praise a lot. And I'm going, well, okay, here's the data, all right? You reprimanded 6 times more often than you praised. Damn. All right? You can't change behavior you don't know you're displaying. And so if, as a teacher, I think I'm doing wonderful, why would I ever be concerned about this? And so that's where this data has been really powerful, is that all of a sudden you get somebody who says, well, here's what happened, and they're going, whoa, that's news to me. I would never have guessed that. I mean, think of your colleagues. How many of your colleagues think if you ask them, they go, oh, no, hell, I reprimand a whole lot more than I praise. I am damn good at this, right? We all think we're positive, but the reality is most of us aren't. Most of us are reprimanding far more than we praise. So if you can get something like this going on in your school, in your classroom, it doesn't have to be the whole school. Get a few of your colleagues that are saying, we'll do this together. We'll just, I'll take 15 minutes of one of my planning periods each week, and I'll come in your room, you come into my room. You can make a hell of a difference.
What are your first two columns?
Opportunities to respond. So did they get an opportunity to respond? And if they responded, were they correct in their response? Okay? Because one of the other issues that triggers a lot of kids to engage in escape and avoidance is that they get too many errors. So if what I find is that the nature of the tasks are such that I keep getting things wrong, then I'm going to, I don't want to sit here and look stupid. I'd much rather look bad. All right? So if I'm not getting many opportunities, and this is an area again where your students are probably at a far more significant problem in terms of that if as the teacher I'm not making this student part of the fabric of my classroom, I am probably not engaging them in a way that's making them able to demonstrate for the class what their skill level is. I'm not asking them opportunities to respond. I'm not making that public. There might be some, either a para or somebody else working with that student who's giving those things, but that doesn't let that person be part of the classroom. All right, they're in a general ed class. Other questions, comments? Yes?
I know one of my problems is that even if I'm trying to get positive feedback, I get frustrated. Some of my guest students are very visual.
Absolutely.
They'll be like, no, you're lying, you're mad at me. So it's hard to be like, okay, I'll not really control my face.
Okay. Yeah, you're absolutely, she was talking about the fact that even if she's trying to be positive, that we give an awful lot away non-verbally, right? In fact, for all of us, we tend to communicate far more non-verbally than we do verbally. And not just students who are deaf and hearing impaired, many of our special needs kids are much better they've learned that people bullshit them. And so they've become very, very astute to the nonverbal kind of situation. In fact, one of the very first studies I ever did was whether I'd have kids come in and kids with disabilities, kids without disabilities, and I would introduce that one would be in the room and they'd be toys and stuff, and I would introduce a new kid. And there were cameras filming them from both sides. And then I would actually know that they actually ended up playing or not playing, whatever's going on. But then I would show just the videos of the kids coming in. So they didn't see the other kid. They just saw either somebody entering or somebody there playing already. And by their verbal messages, could other kids say, is this kid going to let you play with them or not? And kids with disabilities were incredibly good at predicting that successfully. All right? And that actually came around because when I worked at a residential treatment center, and we would have kids who would say, you're going to quit, aren't you? You're leaving. Before the staff ever told anyone they were leaving, the kid could pick up that this person is already starting to disengage and would know that was going on.
Some students seem to respond better or more positively to praise than other students. And how do you build that up or increase that for a student who doesn't seem to respond?
I think sometimes I think there's two things. I think one is the fact that especially as kids get older, sometimes it's not cool to be the goody two shoes kind of a situation, and then praise has to be a little bit more subtle. My personal experience has been I've got a lot of kids who do not know how to accept praise. It doesn't mean they don't want it. And they may even look overtly like they don't want it, but they still do. So my own experience has been I tend to, I respect the fact of trying to make it subtle, to try to make it not, over the top kind of a thing, but I'm going to give you praise even if you can't accept it, because it's not, it's my job as the teacher is to give you feedback. All right? And I've got to give you feedback when you've done something positively. I've got to give you feedback and when you've done something wrong too, if I'm trying to teach what's going on. But students will have a problem sometimes with either one of those.
Yeah, I was wondering if you was talking more directly about someone who's like oppositional defiant, who once they know what you want, works in the opposite direction.
And that's oftentimes when we'll talk about some of the mental health issues. And I think sometimes with some of the students that you're working with, issues of control become critical. Do I have control? And for kids with oppositional defiant disorder, other things, anything we ask them to do. So if I'm saying we're going to read this next page, as the teacher, I'm really trying to teach literacy and reading and to expand your skills. To the kid, you are trying to control me. You are trying to tell me what I have to do. And it's all control. Right? Now, part of the issue is that the more we'll talk today about issues around how to use choice. Because quite frankly, when you've got kids who are beginning to escalate, choice is one of the most powerful tools you've got. And oftentimes one of the best ways to short circuit some of that is, can I give some autonomy and some choice in that situation so that at least I lessen that issue of that you're just trying to control me. But those are real, and it's not just I'm trying to be a jerk here. There's a biochemistry behind my oppositional defiant disorder. This is not my just willful, I don't want to do the work that you want me to do. You're triggering fear, you're triggering frustration, and I'm acting on those accordingly. Yeah.
How do you get teachers to buy into there's an actual diagnosable issue here, and this kid isn't just being a jerk? Do you think that's a tough one. I'll be real honest with you. That's a hard issue, and it's hard issue on two sides. One is the fact that I've got to help this teacher realize that there's a biological substrate to a lot of these issues. If I get them to accept that, one of the other challenges is then it's like, oh well, shit, then I can't do anything about this, and then I, oh God, it's hardwired. I'm hopeless. This kid just needs to be someplace else then. And it's like neither not recognizing it or feeling like I'm hopeless is helpful. Now the dilemma is that we have in most schools 3-4 school days that we have for staff development, and they're all tied up with reading, right? And so where do we begin to help teachers gain the knowledge they're not getting in pre-service, around mental health issues? We have learned so much more about trauma. We've learned so much more about some of some of those biological aspects, and what we can do as school people in terms of even cognitive behavioral kinds of approaches, things that have been shown to be terribly effective. We just don't have any time to give this material out. So I know, me personally, one of the issues is that I know when I write a behavioral intervention plan, if there's a mental health piece, I try to truly, where there's a section in the forms that I use anyhow that talk about, is there a health aspect, and that can be a pretty extensive piece. I also, any medication, I list the medication and I list what it's about. Just go to the websites that have the meds, and I also talk about side effects. One of the we'll talk a little bit later on this. One of the big challenges is, for example, that maybe I'm kind of a weird person when you get me to come in here, because I get called into usually pretty strange kind of situations. I don't have the kind of more typical ones, but right now I'm getting called in a lot on lawsuits and things around kids who have been hurt during restraints. And in the United States, about 200 children die every year in restraint. Okay. Now, nobody goes to school in the morning going, I'm going to kill somebody, but it happens. And the number one reason is because the restraint got in the way of breathing and circulation. The second is that the student overheated. Okay. Almost any, not necessarily all of them, but almost any medication a child is taking for anxiety or a mood disorder increases the problems they have in dissipating heat. So, for example, if I'm on risperidone, I'm going to have 6 times more problems dissipating body heat than a kid who's not taking this medication. So now I've got an anxiety disorder, I've got a mood disorder, which puts me at a higher risk of becoming escalated, becoming angry, becoming aggressive, and if you restrain me, I'm 6 times more likely to have a problem in the restraint.
And most teachers know nothing about that. And so it becomes this issue of how do I, in my behavior intervention plan, make sure that's documented. So that people say, this is a kid who you better think real seriously about de-escalating quickly. You don't want to see this kid get to 90. What are we going to have to do here, as part of this plan? Okay. All right, so one of the other ways that we've done this, and I've shown this one before, we draw out the classrooms, and we do all these kind of funny things like where the desks are at. This is a real popular issue now in a lot of classrooms. We want kids to be across from each other. And what has 2 million years of human evolution said? If we're sitting across from each other, what should we be doing? We should be communicating, right? And so you put kids in this and they start communicating, and then what do teachers say? Stop communicating. It's like, well then, damn it, don't sit me like this, all right? Unless this is some time for us to share and work together, maybe I shouldn't be sitting like this. But we'll draw this out. And we've shown this before where simply just in each student's desk, I just have 5 boxes and we mark what's going on. I'll tell you the truth, this is a more powerful way if you're going to go into a teacher's classroom and give this kind of feedback. This is a more powerful model if you can draw the desks out and see what's going on, because oftentimes where the kids are located in the room makes a difference in terms of what's going on, who's sitting next to each other, how things are going, how things are happening. But we simply draw out, and you'll see some kids whose desks look like this. They got no opportunities to respond, no praise, no reprimand. They were just there, right? Now, some kids like to be that kid who's just there. Remember when you were in school, the teacher that only called on you when they had eye contact? What did you do when you didn't know what was going on? You looked away, because if I don't see them, they can't see me, right? Right? And so we have some students who want to look like this, but the problem is this a good recipe for success necessarily? So if all of a sudden, and this can be a powerful tool for you to show how your student might not be engaged in the fabric of the classroom, is to say, let's look at this. What's going on here? How do we know he was even there? Okay. You've got this kid who's got a lot of praise, a couple of reprimands, some verbal praise. Not bad. Most of us would like to be that kid, right? And then as we've talked about before, we've got Randy. And if we took data for 20 minutes, Randy got 12 reprimands. That's not unusual. That you'll have one kid in the classroom that will get over half the reprimand for the entire class. And we're kind of going, whatever we do at school, you don't do it well. Hey, but come back tomorrow excited, won't you? So we can tell you tomorrow how bad you do, all right? And we'll just keep doing this, and we're going to keep playing this game until one of us gets, He got 3 opportunities to respond. He was wrong twice. How many of you would keep working if you only got 33% correct? Not many, right? What is he getting a lot of here? Attention. For what? Behavior we don't want. Where should the attention be? Down here. How much is he getting down there? Nothing. What will you hear a teacher say? He's not doing anything good, right? That's where being, and as special ed, those of you that have students in general education, we have lost our role in general ed as special educators for the most part. We are now almost more like very expensive paraprofessionals. We go in, we oftentimes don't know what they're going to be teaching. We're just standing there kind of putting patches on the canoe as it's going down the river. Okay? And we've got to change that. And part of how we change that in some cases is by taking information like this, going in and saying, this isn't working. All right? In this case, I've got to get things done. How can I begin to help this teacher know what could they do to get more opportunities to respond? And I've used this example before because I used it a lot as a teacher, because I taught high school. By high school, a lot of kids have already learned school's not for them. So they come in and they just sit. They aren't going to volunteer, they aren't going to say anything, they may even put their head down and sleep if they're allowed to do so. And I would have to do things like, she's the brightest kid in the class. I would ask her a question, she would answer, I would go, do you agree? Do you even have to know what the question was? What do you have to know? She's bright. Agree with her, life is good, all right? And now I could go, wow, good job, both of you did wonderful. That's right, you're both right. That's the first time you've heard that in 3 years, right? And all of a sudden you perk up a little bit. We've got to start helping our general education teachers think of some strategies to engage our students. How do we get them involved? How do we ask them? And in some cases, it's going to be a pretty lukewarm start. All right? But once I get them engaged, then I can start giving them those kind of low-hanging fruit questions, and ultimately they can become part of the class. All right. We've got this whole IDA stuff. I just threw this in, and because I know you guys know this because we've actually talked about this in this program here. But I was actually up in northern Wisconsin a month ago, and I showed this slide, and it was a group of social workers, and there was this. When did this start? Oh, a little over a decade ago, we were supposed to be doing this kind of thing. Yeah, kind of. It's like completely gone from them that they had to do this. So I was like, okay, wow, all right. Okay, so we're supposed to use this positive situations going on. Most human behavior is learned, thank God, and because it's learned, it can be unlearned, right? Only about between 4 and 6% of the behaviors that we address are biologically based. If some of you may have, if you've ever seen a child with Rett syndrome, not Tourette's, but Rett syndrome, where they have like a hand-washing movement in the middle, and that's tied to biology. That applied behavior analysis doesn't change that. That's linked into the basal ganglia. That's a biological. It's like Parkinson. With a lot of energy, they can break out of that for short periods of time, but then they're right back into it again. That's not a learned behavior. Okay. Fortunately, most of our behaviors are learned. All right. Okay. So we've got Jeremy. He's a 3rd grade student. This is then we'll depart from this. He's got a hearing disorder. Frequently stands back, refuses to actively participate in the lesson. He'll observe, but refuses to offer any responses or to engage in the assigned work. How might a teacher handle a student like this? What might happen? I'm not going to do the work. I'm not going to answer. Might ignore him. Okay? So it's kind of like, all right, he's not causing any problems. He's not being overtly problematic, so he can just kind of sit.
Group activity with students take turns.
Okay. So bring him with the students and say they'd do what?
Are you trying to get him to respond?
Okay. So you would just so what would you do if you were the teacher?
Just have an exercise that everybody tell me your favorite colors.
Okay.
And we would
Just
something
go-
simple that wouldn't be a challenge.
Okay. All right. So I might try to find something that might be a high interest. I might try something that I know that this is not challenging this student. Okay. Will he engage then? Is this a situation where I'm not willing to risk? Is this a risk issue? All right. And it might be, and he might be willing to do that. Might not want to even do that. Yeah, he may choose, I'm just not going to be part of this. Somebody mentioned lack of confidence. I'm not feeling very safe or comfortable, and I am better off if I just stand back and watch and just let me alone. Life is good. All right, I'll make sense out of the world by just watching. All right, don't force me to do anything. Might we have teachers who get into go ahead.
So maybe have a peer try to welcome him into a group.
Okay.
Or have a peer try to engage with him as
All right.
opposed to the adults.
Okay. So I might try to find a peer because that might make it a little bit easier for him, a little less risky in terms of he's got just one, and hopefully it would be a peer that's got a good relationship, kind of their ability to make those kind of relationships. Do we ever see people try to force the kids to comply? Okay. Okay. Yeah, if you're not going to do the work, you're staying in here until it's done. Okay? So this can be one of those things that starts a power struggle because I've chosen not to engage, and instead of looking for a way to trap the kid into engagement, through some successful situation, we're going to try to force this. Right? Cool. So what I want you to do is think for a few minutes, maybe at your table, talk amongst yourselves. What are some of the basic human needs or the needs that you see the students that you work with, just as far as being children, whoever they are at their age, what are some of the needs that seem to be really critical needs for them to meet? And then how are those impacted by their sensory impairment? So talk at your table a little bit, amongst yourselves. What are some of the needs the students that you have come with? Yes?
Need for belonging.
Okay, a need to feel like they belong. Okay? And do some of our students have a problem with that? All right. How is that impacted by by sensory impairment? Is that impacted in any way by sensory impairment? Okay.
Lack of incidental learning, so they don't know what's being talked about in their age groups.
Okay. All right. So they may not have the same level of information in terms of what's going on, and they may not feel as included because they're not able to communicate, or people aren't able to communicate with them. All right. What else? What other needs? Yeah.
They need to feel valued for something.
Okay.
Feel that they have a skill. Yeah. Something. If it's
Okay.
not academics, then maybe it's sports or technology or something.
So that I've got some level of competence, some level of self, that I can feel good about myself, some self-esteem, right? Is that impacted by the fact that I've got a sensory impairment? Can it be? Sure. Okay. What other needs? Yes.
We said, well, along that, we said success.
Okay.
We said the impact would be sometimes being compared to siblings or other friends that are the same age, might not be doing the same level of work. And also like unrealistic demands when they're taking standardized testing. You know, we're testing a kid that might be reading at the third grade level, or math at the third grade level, we're testing them, you know, at the sixth grade level. And it's really unrealistic to think that they can test well and then.
Okay. So levels of success and issues around testing, issues around that we expect them to do tasks. They may be somewhat depressed in terms of their skill level, in terms of what's going on, and yet we're putting demands on them to be able to compete with their colleagues, with their peers. Other? I just wanted to repeat so that. Okay. Yes.
Basic healthcare, and then my students can communicate to their parents what's wrong, and then we don't necessarily have an interpreter for that.
Okay. All right. Healthcare to be pain-free, right? Is that a need that we have as humans? And all of a sudden, if I can't communicate what hurts or where it hurts or what's going on, and in some cases, I may not even have the information to know, is this something I should be concerned about? So I could be having some vision problems, different things like that. I don't know I've got a vision problem, right? This is just the way the world looks, right? Why would I think there was a problem with this? Okay?
If they can get past their stage of denial about their impairment, they need acceptance from others as well. And once if they can accept it, some of them can't, they stay in denial, then they also need acceptance from those around them.
Okay. So that sense of that sense of who I am and what's going on, it's also going to be part of self-esteem. Can I accept myself, who I am, both with my skills, my abilities, and the challenges that I have, because we all have them. And then can I feel like I can be part of that, again, that fabric, and that other people can accept who I am and move forward. All right. One of the big challenges that we're going to have as we move forward in here is the fact that for the most part, when you've got students, especially who engage in escape and avoidance, the issue becomes, what need did we miss? What need is being dealt with here? Because I can't just deal with the fact that there's an escape. What I've got to look at is what's behind that escape. And so the more you can think about needs, the more you can get your teachers that are working with these kids to think about, when you see this behavior, don't just act on the escape. Ask the next question. What's going on underneath this situation? All right, let's take a break. It's 10:49 according to my clock. Let's get back here at 11. Will 11 work? 11 minutes? Would that be enough break? Good. All right, there's about 18 bathrooms around here, so it shouldn't be a problem for bathroom. Questions, comments, or concerns? Anything going on? Questions? Comments? Life good? We're going to move through some stuff here pretty quickly here. Okay, so many of you have seen my coffee. No.
Going back to the medications and all the side effects, who is responsible for giving that information out? Is it the case manager, is it the doctor?
It's not the doctor. Yeah, it's not the doctor. The doctor's job is to prescribe the medication. It's our as a special education person or anybody, if you've got somebody who's got medication, Somebody at the school should be taking out. In most schools, the school nurse would play a major role in that, in terms of knowing what medications kids are on, because that's kind of their area. I'll be real honest with you. My experience has been that if it's a student on my caseload, I better know this and I better get that information out. Because I don't want to just pass it and say, well, they should have done it. Well, the reality is this is pretty, yeah. So, I would say case manager, but that's every school is going to have kind of a, yes. Is there something you have to do to what? A HIPAA violation? Well, HIPAA is basically it says I don't have to give, I can't give information to people who don't need the information. Clearly, if I've got a student who's on a medication that if I restrain him, I have a bigger chance of this student dying, and I'm the person who's likely to restrain him, do I have a need to know this?
Yeah. I know, for instance, my brother,
the hospital won't share it, but if they're over 21, then that's going to be that becomes an issue where the student themselves, that you've got those laws that now it's my information, I can choose to share it or not share it. I'm putting myself at risk, kind of a thing. And the reality is that they're putting themselves at risk. Sometimes it becomes important for us as part of our working with students with disabilities and just issues to understand the issues. I don't think a lot of the students who are on these medications understand the impact of this medication. What is this medication for? What are the side effects I should be looking at? What should I know about what's going on? This is just something that's been, take this in the morning, take this at night, life is good, and I think that can even be maybe need to be part of the educational plan of part of transitioning to adulthood. How do we begin to help people understand their medications, their need for medications? We've done stuff with kids where we've actually made it part of like an English lesson where they're doing an essay on if I've got depression, what's the biochemistry of depression, what do the medications do? And we make it part of an assignment for them to get better knowledge about what's going on. Sometimes it's very enlightening for them. But you'll get a lot of parents who don't want to share it. You'll get a lot of school nurses, you'll get a lot of school social workers, people who feel uncomfortable sharing that. And part of the dilemma here is they're uncomfortable sharing it because we have not been very good. We go to the teacher's lounge and we start sharing this. And what needs to happen is that schools need to be just more serious and saying, if you're in this teacher's lounge sharing this, you're going to get written up, and if you do it twice, you're going to get fired, and we're not going to screw around with this. This is important information. But you need to have the information. You just need to use it appropriately. And we need to make sure that if our paras or whoever's got it that has it, but if I need to know, I need to know. And then sometimes you'll get people just say, well, HIPAA says I can't share it. No, if I need to know, you can share it.
Other than, for the teacher's perspective, other than knowing they take medication, the teacher's not educated on knowing anything about medication. So other than knowing the time of taking the medication, is there any purpose for them knowing beyond that?
I'd want to know the side effects. I'd want to know any kind of potential risks to it. So for example, if I've got a student who's on a medication that they take it in the morning and this is going to be and this is not a time-release medication, that I can pretty much count on by the time afternoon comes, I'm not going to have much impact of this medication anymore. And that might make a difference in terms of what I schedule and how I schedule my day. I may want to know this medication makes this student sleepy. And so if I've got this kid who's looking sleepy, this is not just them trying to escape a task. This may actually be a side effect of the medication. If I've got a student whose medication is one of these that I have to be aware of, that this actually can create issues around overheating, I'll watch physical education teachers have kids run up and down bleachers, and I'm going, do you know this? You shouldn't be doing that with this kid.
So kind of coming in the back door there, I'm constantly recommending that teachers write paragraphs with numbers describing the behavior to send to the doctor, because the doctor doesn't have contact with the school. And if they ask the parents how are they doing in school, the parents have like 10 minutes to say whatever they say.
Right. Yeah, if you've got students, especially if they're starting, either if you're getting side effects or if they're just starting meds. So for example, even things like, a common one would be like ADHD. The medication that you take for that, whether it's a stimulant or if it's like Strattera, one of the newer medications, what you really want that medication to impact is the child's ability to attend, not their motor behavior. Okay? Are they attending better? If I can get them to attend better, then I use my behavioral programming to create programs that support them being successful in the classroom. Most parents give medication until the motor behavior is impacted. By the time I've impacted motor behavior, I have so dulled the person's ability to attend, I've got a less effective student then than I had before I ever put them on meds. But parents aren't good at judging attention. Right? We are good at that. So if you're working with young students in medication, oftentimes, get your nurse to be talking with a doctor. Oftentimes doctors will send like a 4-question Likert scale, so that they know, is this the optimum level of medication? Am I getting the kinds of things I want, the effect I want? The other thing to be aware of is that we see a lot of comorbid disorders between anxiety disorders and things like attention deficit disorder with hyperactivity. The medication for one triggers problems with the medication for the other. So oftentimes you're going to have to decide which devil you want to dance with. Am I going to deal with the anxiety or am I going to deal with the ADHD? Because if I medicate one, I can't medicate them both. All right? And sometimes you as the teacher may want to weigh in on that because I can deal better with the ADHD than I can the anxiety, or I can deal better with the anxiety than I can the ADHD. Help the parent, help the doctor understand what's going on. But know the medications, know what's happening. These are just some slides I've shown before. I'm going to whip through these really fast. These are the issues around the function. So we think about needs. Don't encourage them, Sylvia. What's going on here? I just like these Gary Larson cartoons. I think it's a lost thing without having Gary Larson around and doing these anymore. What's he looking for? Attention. Okay, do we ever have kids do things for attention? Yeah. What is he really looking for? A little undivided time with at least one of those hands, right? When somebody does something for attention, always ask the question, where does the attention lead? Because for many of our students, until they have somebody's attention, they can't get any of their needs met. And it's not really attention I want, it's what the attention gets me. All right? So I'm hungry, but if I don't get somebody to pay attention to me, I'm not going to get any food. All right? Kind of a thing. No way I'm going to that party tonight, I won't know anyone there, and that means I'll be introduced. And I never learned to shake. Okay? This is that escape and avoidance, right? All right? And we've all done this, okay? No way, I'll put my magazine down when you put yours down. What's going on here? Power and control, okay? Is it important to have control? Now, if you are a teacher and you're going, I don't know, you're kidding yourself. We want control, right? Okay? We want to be in control. Everybody wants control. Control is an incredibly important thing to have in your life. And if you don't feel you've got any, life is pretty difficult. All right, Rusty's in the club. Right. Little peer affiliation. Okay, we've all done that too. All right. I stole the record back when I was 12 years old. Right? It's going to make me cool. All it does is cause me to not be able to leave my yard for 2 months. Okay. Just stay in the cab, Vern. Maybe that bear's hurt, maybe he ain't. And it's Bob's Honeys, Berries, and Grubs. Okay? Sometimes it's the actual tangible situation. You've got the ball, bam, I've got the ball. Life is good, right? For crying out loud, Warren, can't you just beat your chest like everyone else? And Warren's doing this fart thing under his arm. Okay? Again, at a certain age, people start trying on new persona. That's one of the challenges that you have in those small groups that are always together, is that sometimes it's very hard for kids to break out and try these new identities. Most of us do this kind of a thing, right? You guys are both my witnesses. He laughed when my marshmallow caught fire, and you can see he shot the guy. He's kind of laying there, okay? All right? Justice and revenge, okay? So be a really powerful function. So we've got a lot of these issues: attention, escape and avoidance, power control, peer affiliation, material gain, self-gratification, justice and revenge. And we have to keep in mind that many times behavior, instead of just being a function, part of the function is that it serves a communicative intent. And we brought that out before, is that this is a way for me to communicate my need or my sense of that I'm done with this and you don't understand that I'm done with this, and so let me show you how done I am with what you're asking me to do. Right? Okay. When we're talking about behavior, when we're developing plans, we want to look at the function rather than the form. I still get teachers who call me, I get emails from people going, I've got a kid who's aggressing, what do I do? I can give you a much better plan if you tell me the function of the behavior. I've got a kid who's looking for peer affiliation, is engaging in inappropriate behavior for peer affiliation. I can write you a better plan, don't even tell me what the behavior is, than if you call and tell me I've got a kid who's being aggressive, what should I do? Because there's lots of reasons I can become aggressive. And telling me that I'm aggressive tells me nothing. It just tells me kind of what behavior I want to look out for. But it doesn't give me any information that's going to help me develop a plan. So helping teachers, helping yourself think about the function, not the form of the behavior, is absolutely critical. Okay? And that becomes a bigger issue here when we talk about escape, because that's the one function that doesn't tell me anything. All it tells me again is what the surface behavior is, and it's even, if I've got somebody who's engaging in behavior again for peer affiliation, I know I can give them an alternative behavior that will get them friends or let them become part of a group as an alternative behavior. If I've got somebody who's doing something for attention, I can give them a different behavior that will get me to attend. When I've got escape, it's a whole different animal. All right, now I may, in some cases, do a very quick replacement behavior. So I've got a student right now, let's say, that I'm sitting there in the class, you're asking me to do something. I tell you, to go screw yourself. I take my arm and I swipe everything off of my desk. Then I flip the desk over. That's not a fun behavior, right? That's not something I want to see a lot of in my classroom. I might realize that, okay, this kid doesn't have this. Something's going on that when I bring out reading, all hell breaks loose. All right? I'll tell you what, you don't have to clear the desk. If you feel like you're uncomfortable, you can't do this, I've got a desk in the back of the room. Feel free to get up and go back there and have a seat. There's some stuff there you can work with, and I will get with you as quickly as I can. I will give the student another way to escape that doesn't require them to destroy my classroom as a short-term replacement behavior. All right? It's still escape. That's not my answer. It's just a safety valve. It beats what they're doing now. Okay? And you'll get teachers who are afraid to do that because he's going to spend all of his time in that back seat. Well, maybe. Okay? And one of the challenges comes down to that the minute that he goes back there, I've got to first of all think about what the hell was going on here that all of a sudden he couldn't do this, and can I change that in some way? All right? The other thing I've got to think about is that now I want to get him back. All right? So let's say I'm the teacher here, and I'll pick on somebody. I'll pick on you. What's your first name?
Amy.
Amy. Amy's just done something that's incredibly wrong in my classroom, and I said, okay, Amy, I want you to take your seat, and I want you to pull your chair over to the wall. Okay. Amy's now in timeout. Okay? I want the rest of you on your note, on your handout, to solve for the square root of 632. Who would you rather be right now? Amy, you can, okay? The minute Amy is out, this group better be doing something that's a little bit more exciting, because what do I want Amy to be thinking as she's over there? Damn, I want to be in that group. If what we're doing is stuff where she's going, shoo, thank God I'm over here, okay? And I'll see that time and time again. It's kind of like they've got somebody who's not, and well, I don't want to do that either. I wouldn't want to do this, right? That's part of just teaching your teachers how to become effective. Now, that doesn't mean I have to do this all day long, but right now I've got to try to get this kid back in and make this successful.
One of the escape behaviors that we're seeing quite often is children who will take off their cochlear implant and throw it when they don't want to pay attention.
Which is a pretty powerful way of saying I'm shutting you all down, right? Okay? And so, and again, it's regardless of what the overt behavior is, what's the need? And so that's where the issue becomes of looking at needs. We talk about, do we have a human need to escape? Yes. What do you think, yeah? No. Escape is not a human need. Escape is a primal response if you threaten other needs. I have no need to escape. If life is good, I'm not going to escape. Threaten my safety? I'm going to escape. Threaten my self-confidence? I'm going to escape. Threaten my autonomy? I'm going to escape. All right? It's a primal response. That's the problem, is that it's not, what I've got to think of is, what's the need? Because any intervention I'm going to do that's going to be successful has to identify that need, not the escape. And that's the dilemma, because what we get teachers going is that you're not escaping. You're going to sit there, and if you don't do your math now, you will sit there during recess, and you will sit there after school, and then you're going to take it home for homework, but you're going to do that damn math, right? And if the kid can't do the math, I've got a heck of a battle going, right? So, sorry, stand right in front of you. So the issue is I've got to look and say, what's that need? All right? So we go to good old Maslow, right? And we talk about physiological needs. And we talked a little bit about that in terms of some of the issues around, am I hungry? Do all of our kids come to school, their physiological needs met? No. Do we have programs in place in our schools to deal with that? Yeah, we have free breakfast, free lunch. We have some of those kind of things. Oftentimes school, every day would start with, I would have breakfast for my kids because a lot of my kids didn't have breakfast. And it also gave me a chance to see if they were high, talk a little bit about what was going on. I mean, it just gave me a chance to, that was my cross to bear. What do you So, if that need's met, Maslow said we're ready to move on to safety. Do our kids come with all their safety needs met? No. Do we trigger issues around safety in schools? Do we ever make kids feel less than safe? Okay. I was in a school not too long ago, and a little guy, I don't know if he was a preschooler or a kindergartner, but he wasn't beyond kindergarten, ran out of the classroom, ran into the teacher's lounge. As he ran into the teacher's lounge, there was a butter knife up on the shelf. He grabbed the butter knife, slid under two tables that had been pushed together. He's hiding under the table with a butter knife. And there are 4 staff all trying to reach and grab him, all talking to him at one time. And I'm like, is nobody looking at what he's telling us right here? If I'm under a table with a butter knife, what message am I telling you that my need might be here? I'm not feeling particularly safe. And having 4 people trying to reach and grab me probably isn't making me feel safer. All right? It became this issue of that we're responding without sitting back a minute and thinking about what's the message here? What should I be assessing to make the best decision about how I'm going to intervene? Right. So if the safety is dealt with, then we're ready to go into what we talked about before, love and belonging. Do our kids all come with their love and belonging needs met? Do we have programs in place for this in our school? Damn few. Social worker drives by twice a month, right? We oftentimes don't have a great deal of stuff going on around issues around belonging and love. Esteem. Now, schools actually think Maslow had this backwards because I think we think esteem comes before love and belonging because, quite frankly, if you don't do the work I want you to do when I ask you to do it, you don't belong here. And we're asking kids to risk in areas where we're constantly threatening to take them out of there. That's not a good situation. If you want me to risk, don't put my belonging at risk. And then we get the self-actualization, and I don't even know if Maslow knew what the hell that was. I always say I'll be self-actualized when I'm singing country western music in Nashville, which will never happen. Okay. Yep.
When you said control, sometimes it helps me to think of all of this, like, do I do this? Do I do this? And I had a husband that has passed away, but that was very sick, and sick a good portion of his life. He did avoidance all the time with his health issues. If I don't get that blood test, that I don't know that I'm sick. And sometimes I think, oh, do I do any of that? And we do that. And when you said the need for control, that was his need for control. And it just helps me to think that it's not me being perfect and the kids.
We're all in here. Yeah, we're all in here all the time. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I move, I bounce around those things quite a bit. This is it's part of what makes this particular model All of these models are not realities. They're just things we put over things to help us predict. But I like looking at Maslow's needs because it's a relatively simplistic approach, but it's very powerful to help think about what's going on with this kid. If I'm looking at what's going on, which needs hitting here? And I'll be real honest with you. These down here oftentimes are the safety and belonging are really, really powerful ones. We'll put it someplace else, but oftentimes I'm not feeling safe. Even asking me to respond academically, sometimes what you're triggering is a safety need. I'm going to look stupid, and so it's not only the self-esteem, it's the issue of that I'm going to be laughed at, people are going to tease me, this is not a safe place now. It becomes a problem, all right? Typically, escape and avoidance results from threats to safety, competence, and autonomy. Those are the top ones. We are in a perfect storm in terms of the whole issue around competence, because we are asking students so often now to do things that are beyond their sense of that I can do this successfully. All right? We're also seeing that with our teachers. We're asking our teachers to do things that is beyond their ability to feel that I can do this successfully. And we're threatening teachers' sense of control. I have no control of how to make this. I may have a really good sense in my head of how I could make this work for this kid, but I don't feel like I can make those changes because there's administrators, whatever's going on, and I don't have the control to do that, and that adds to my frustration and my anxiety, and that becomes another level of problems that we're facing in the school. Okay. So fear, a lot of our kids fear of failure, fear of the teacher, fear of peers. Do our kids get bullied? Do they get picked on and teased? Okay. Fear of the unknown. And again, a lot of the students that you're dealing with don't have the same level of exposure to the world that some other kids have, and so there's an awful lot of things that don't necessarily make as much sense to them and are more frightening. Frightening locations, post-traumatic events. It's estimated now that about 13% of the kids in your classroom also are dealing with post-traumatic stress. And we're just now beginning to think about how to be trauma-informed in schools. That's been a big issue around other places, but it's just now starting to dribble down into our schools. Okay? So what does fear look like for your students? How would I begin to look at a student and go, I think this is fear. I'm trying to assess what's going on here. This looks like fear to me. What would that look like?
Maybe physically jumpy or
okay.
flinching.
I'm going to probably, much more likely, I might be doing I want some distance. I might be moving back and forth. What might my eyes be doing? I'm probably going all over the place because if I'm fearful, I want to make sure I know what's going on in the world around me. Okay, so I'm much more likely to be, kind of this kind of situation, all right? If I've got speech, what might my speech be doing? Okay. All right, I might be more breathless. I might be more issues in terms of almost some trembling kind of situations going on. If I'm signing, how might my signing change if I'm fearful? Okay, might go into a smaller area, all right? Might it be more rapid? Okay. The task as the teacher, as the staff member here, is threat reduction. All right? What I've got to do is help this person feel safe. The one challenge that we have, again, is because we've got this pressure to produce, part of what I have to do if I'm sensing that it's safety, I have got to back off. I've got to give this student the gift of space and time. And so it may be a situation that, we're going to talk here, basically I want to reassure, I want you to feel safe. What we have been working with teachers on is kind of a little formula here in terms of if I've got a situation with escape, the student is starting to escalate, what I want to do is use an empathetic I statement so that the student knows that I want you to feel safe. Because the kid may say, I'm fine. Okay, then safety may not be it, all right? It gives you a chance to at least see, am I in the right ballpark here? I want you to feel safe. And then can you give them 2 meaningful, positive options that would allow them to feel safe? I have to keep you in eyesight, but I'll tell you what. You can go sit over there, there's a safety spot in the room, go have a seat there, life will be good, we'll give you some space. Or we could walk down to the counselor's office. Are there two things I can do that can actually allow this student to feel safe? Because right now, that's the key issue.
What do I do if I've got a kid whose response to fear is to just fall out of his chair, collapse, and freeze? And we've taught this safe, calming area in the classroom. We've taught about safe spaces. We've practiced it. He's doing great when he's calm and runs through it. But we've got 6 other kids in the room, and the kid is just on the floor. Do we just leave him there? I struggle with this. The teacher struggles with this. And we want him to feel safe, because that's what he's responding to, is this fear. But we don't know how to give him that safe space when he's frozen.
So if I've dropped to the floor and I'm frozen, what am I doing then? Just staying there?
He doesn't move. If he just stays there, covers his face, he's hiding.
Tell me what else you could do if I'm there. What else could you do with me now?
I mean, what I've done is kind of put up dividers and let him know that I was there and waited.
Yeah. I mean, part of the issue is that to sometimes this stuff is kind of, there's not much I can do. If he's already on the floor and he's frozen, all right, he's not hurt anybody, he's not hurt anything else going on, I would probably do the same thing. He's fine there, there's no problem. I would probably want to have a program continue to teach, continue to work with things. We're going to talk about some check-in, check-out, kind of some things where could I give him a better place to go to be safe? I would also be trying to look and say, does he give any telegraphing that this is coming? Some kids do, some kids it's really fast. Yeah, and for a lot of our kids, they don't feel themselves becoming upset. They don't have that internal sense. Some of us feel like, we can feel our blood almost kind of going through our veins, we can, and we get this sense that something's going on. For a lot of our kids, they have no sense of that whatsoever until they're gone. And so you have to oftentimes teach the kids, when you start seeing yourself shuffle papers, that's an indication that things are starting to get a little antsy for you, and that might be a good time for you to go use the safe spot. So if you can help, we've had kids where we've literally had to teach that whole kind of amazing 5-point scale is around, this is the behavior, all right? When you're doing this, these strategies. When you're doing this, these strategies. We got one kid, when you take off your shoes, the shit's going to hit the fan. This is where you got to be, all right? That's your cue, because when you take off your shoes, that's the message. This is you've hit the end. You've hit the end of your rope, kind of a thing. So I would be looking for those things with this kid. You're lucky he's freezing.
Yeah, some days it's freezing.
Yeah.
Some days it's throwing.
Yeah. Yeah. So frustration is another one. This is a huge one for many of our students. All right? So given increased levels of expectations, unclear expectations, it is amazing how many classrooms I go into, and I'm talking about a student who's got average intelligence, full use of all their senses, and it's still damn near impossible to figure out what is this teacher expecting this kid to do right now. Now, put some challenges in there. I don't know how some of these students make it through the course of a typical day around some of the teachers in terms of what's going on. So I've had to work with a lot of teachers in terms of, I'm a big proponent, especially in early schools with Randy Sprick's CHAMPS program. Basically because how am I going to, what can you do communicatively? What can you do as far as, issues around what's the action, what's the movement? Not just for the kids, but for the teacher. In this activity, there is no talking, all right? If I put that up, I remind myself as the teacher there's no talking, so that when she talks out, I don't answer her. Because I'll go into classrooms and I'll take data on this and I'll go, okay, you said no talking. You had 72 talkouts. Of those 72 talkouts, you responded positively to 14 of them. If I could get the gambling casinos on the boat here, if I get Rivers down here to pay off like that, I wouldn't be here right now. I'd be down at the boat, right? Why would this kid not talk out if they're going to get this level of response? Right? Again, we're not bad teachers, that's just kind of what we do. But if I'm not clear on my expectations, that kind of thing happens. Challenging work, unfamiliar topics, lack of knowledge or skills, too many errors. How many of you have kids that the minute you start giving them no, 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 I hate this shit, boom, right? Too many reprimands. If I'm being told no too many times, and for a lot of our kids, the challenge comes down to, like, again, I do a lot with kids with attention deficit. If I'm little Ricky with ADHD, how many times do I talk out in the course of a half hour? Yeah. I'll say 30, all right, 25, 30 times, okay? And what am I going to hear a lot because I do this? Quiet, don't talk, raise your hand, whatever's going on. And now she talks out, and the teacher answers her. Now, she's probably answered me 3 or 4 times too, but do you think I am attending to that? No, what I see is that I get yelled at and she gets answered. What the hell is this nonsense? Right? And I start to respond to the fact that this is just not a fair place.
I think it's difficult because, you talked about there's some students that are just there and they don't participate or anything. So you have, this student right here who never gives anything to the discussion, and then you have this student that does 65 times in a half hour. So, it's hard to stay consistent across kids because when that one kid who never contributes anything actually does, but like they didn't necessarily, it's a talk out.
Right.
You don't want to.
You want to stop it.
Put that out.
Yeah. You need to raise your hand.
So it's hard to. Those kids, they're just so different.
And I would be perfectly okay if a teacher was making those kind of strategic decisions. All right. Okay, and that was the issue. It's like, this kid never responds. They responded, yeah, I know this was flying in the face of everything I just said, but you're absolutely right. I am on this kid like ugly on an ape kind of a thing, all right? Fine, that would be no problem, and that's probably not going to end the world, okay? It's the fact that I'm doing this just indiscriminately across the board, and because this kid doesn't realize they talk out 25 times, and that 19 times they're not on task. And that this one was, Now, in some cases, you might even actually make that part of a lesson. I'm a big proponent of bibliotherapy. I go out and get a lot of books that have issues. You can go to most major libraries, there's a bibliotherapy index. I could look up, it's like a thesaurus, you can look up talkouts. It will have books that have talkouts as its theme. And I might have something where I actually have a character who does that and say, okay, what's the difference between Joe in the book and his talkouts and Sandra in the book and her talkouts? And why might things be different there? And I'm going to actually make a lesson out of that kind of a situation. And then later on, when all of a sudden Randy's talking, I'm going, yes, it's kind of like Joe. This is not a Sandra talkout, this is a Joe talkout. All right? Kind of a situation that's going on. All right. What does frustration look like? What's my body posture now? All right, I'm probably much more large muscle, more in your space kind of a thing. Probably a lot more rigid kind of movements in terms of. If I've got speech, what am I doing now? It's probably loud. It's probably direct. If I'm signing, how might my signs be? Okay, now they're probably bigger, right? Okay. What about my eyes? Now you're probably going to have much more tunnel vision. Now I'm not looking where all the danger is all over the place. Now it's like, listen, damn it, I'm not doing this shit, all right? I want you to know that. Right? So it looks different. We've got to help our teachers look at the difference. Understand. And different kids may have different ways to communicate this. Part of that BIP also, if you've got a situation where this is how this kid telegraphs these issues, talk about that. This becomes part of that preparation issue in terms of understanding the plan. This is what you need to be looking for. These are those subtle cues. Here I want to lend control. Okay. Again, I've got a kid who's escalating. Getting further up in the escalation is not helping a thing. I'm trying to look for a win-win here. So again, I want to use that empathetic I statement. I want you to be successful in math. I'll tell you what, we can turn back. Let's do 2 of the problems we were doing yesterday because you were doing those really well. Or let's go get a drink of water, come back and I'll work with you. Which of those 2 would work with you? And you give them 2 meaningful options that you think they'll take. And it's important that you give them 2. It's important that you, in this formula, because at this point, if I'm already kind of becoming adversarial with you, and you give them to me one at a time, it's like lobbing baseballs at somebody. They're going, no, 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 I don't care what you tell me, no, I hate you, and I'm doing it. When you give them 2, it's like, I've got a choice. Whoa. All of a sudden, I've got some autonomy in that situation, and it changes the chemistry of the interaction. So you want to give them 2 choices together. I don't want an open-ended question, and I'll tell you why about that in just a few minutes, all right? Give them two options. If those 2 don't work, don't be afraid to say, well, how about these 2? Now, you're not going to go through it forever and ever and ever, but, you know, usually if you're giving me a pathway to competence, I will usually take it. Okay? Now, 2 choices is not do what I say or go to the office. Those are not 2 positive choices, okay? So just because there's a choice doesn't mean that you're following the formula kind of a situation, all right? All right, so think of a student that you've worked with that an episode of escape or avoidance led to a pretty significant crisis situation where all of a sudden maybe they became, you know, destructive in the classroom, or maybe they were threatening to hurt someone or hurt themselves. Talk at your tables and let's identify a couple of cases that where somebody came into that, where the behavior escalated to a crisis. Then I want you to think about what need was being threatened or unmet,